Who has been around for 60 years. Incidentally, that's twice my age, which somehow makes me feel both young and old. To celebrate the Diamond anniversary back in November, Shebogan Who and Small Ed once again assembled various members of the WhoTube community to each talk about one Diamond story. I originally planned to make this video 6 months ago, however, as it so often does, life happened. I was going to repurpose my idea until it occurred to me that arriving later than intended is actually pretty on brand for Doctor Who.
It's not 12 hours, it's 12 months. You've been gone a whole year. Sorry.
As this was intended to be a celebration of the entire history of the series, and not just the last 2 decades, I knew that I wanted to talk about a story from the classic era, i.e. pre-2005. Having already talked about Earthshock in a previous video, I decided to discuss one of my other personal favourites, the 4th and final story of Season 7, Inferno. 1970 was a transitional year for Doctor Who. Not only was the series being produced in colour for the first time ever, there was a new Doctor, a new companion, and a new format with the Doctor now exiled on 20th century Earth. Apart from Spearhead from Space, every story from this season is 7 episodes long. In many ways, Season 7 feels like the missing link between 60s Doctor Who and the more recognisable tone and style of 70s Doctor Who. Inferno was the last 7-part story in the series' history. In fact, unless you consider the Trial of a Time Lord to be one 14-part story, Inferno is the last story longer than 6 episodes. It was also the last to feature unique title cards in addition to the regular title sequence. These had been used occasionally throughout seasons 3 to 6, my personal favourite being the Seeds of Death. This stock footage of an erupting volcano had already been seen on Doctor Who in The Enemy of the World. In this story, UNIT is responsible for security on a top-secret project that aims to drill through the Earth's crust in order to harness a new energy source.
Soon we shall penetrate the Earth's crust, and then we'll be able to tap the pockets of Stallman's gas that lie beneath it.
Pockets of what?
Stallman's gas, so named in honour of the originator of the project.
Not a good enough reason to use the word penetrate.
Believe it or not, this premise was actually inspired by 2 real-world attempts to drill through the Earth's crust, one on land and one at sea. Both projects were mysteriously abandoned without achieving their target. Things begin to go wrong when a mysterious green substance starts being dredged up through one of the output pipes. Direct contact with this substance causes people to begin changing into savage creatures. However, the Doctor is more interested in using the project's nuclear reactor to power the TARDIS console, in an attempt to escape his exile. During a trial run, the Doctor is flung sideways into a parallel universe, where the drilling project is nearing completion. When the drill reaches the Earth's crust, all hell breaks loose. The Doctor barely manages to escape the doomed world in time to stop the same disaster from occurring in his own universe. Inferno is a particularly atmospheric story.
Well, it sounds ridiculous, but there's something ominous about the whole project. Your friend the Doctor felt it too.
The music heard throughout is quite eerie. This was the last story to rely solely on stock music instead of an original score. A number of the tracks used were composed by Delia Derbyshire, who also created the first 3 arrangements of Ron Grainer's Doctor Who theme, including the version used in Inferno. Despite being almost 3 hours long, the equivalent runtime of a modern blockbuster, the pacing never drags. With a bit of tightening, it could probably be cut down to 6 episodes. However, there is very little that doesn't serve the story. The threat of Earth's destruction was nothing new for Doctor Who, even in 1970. However, the parallel universe in Inferno gave the production team a unique opportunity to have their cake and eat it too. Episode 6 ends with one of the most harrowing cliffhangers in the series' history.
Go on, Doctor, go now! I can't, it's still too erratic.
Even after escaping back to his own universe, I appreciate the fact that the Doctor actually takes a moment to acknowledge the weight of what he experienced.
It was a parallel world, Liz. Terrible things are happening there. Terrible things.
The entire cast are on top form in this story.
But I don't exist in your world.
And you won't feel the bullets when we shoot you.
Whilst the iconic UNIT family wouldn't be properly established until Season 8 with the introduction of Joe Grant and Mike Yates, we do get an early version of In Inferno, with the Doctor, Liz Shaw, the Brigadier, and Sergeant Benton. Several things suggest that some time has passed since the events of Spearhead from Space, such as the Brigadier becoming more comfortable with the Doctor's alien nature.
Heart's beating steadily?
Both of them?
Yes.
Jon Pertwee had confidently settled into the role of the Doctor by this point. Traditionally known as a comedic actor, Pertwee really sells the more serious moments.
Unless you cooperate, you'll soon be in front of a firing squad. You have very little time left.
My dear young lady, if that computer was functioning, it would warn us that we all have very little time left.
Carolyn John and Nicholas Courtney clearly relished the opportunity to play baddie versions of their respective characters.
Name.
Who sent you here?
Did you come to commit sabotage?
Name!
What organization employs you?
When did you first become a traitor?
It's a credit to both actors that these alternate versions still feel believably recognizable.
This is fascinating. So many similarities, yet so many differences.
Most of the guest cast also had to play two different versions of the same character. The longer runtime allowed more opportunity to develop these characters. Professor Stahlman, played by Olaf Pulley, is a perfect antagonist for the Third Doctor.
Yes, well, I'll tell you something that should be of vital interest to you, Professor.
But what?
That you, sir, are a nitwit.
Far from being a cackling villain, there are a lot of layers to Pulley's performance.
Stahlman, do be reasonable.
I've been more than reasonable. Up till now, I've tolerated these crackpot experts and advisors and only offered a token objection. But now that we've accelerated the drilling program, I won't be obstructed any further.
Christopher Benjamin makes his Doctor Who debut in this story, playing Sir Keith Gold. Nearly 4 decades later, Benjamin would play Colonel Hugh Kirbishley in The Unicorn and the Wasp. However, his most memorable contribution to the series was as Henry Gordon Jago in The Talons of Wang Chiang, a role he has reprised many times on audio for Big Finish Productions. Director Douglas Camfield originally wanted Kate O'Mara to play Petra Williams. However, when the actress proved unavailable, Camfield instead cast his wife, Sheila Dunn. O'Mara did eventually appear on Doctor Who as renegade Time Lord, the Rani. It's interesting to note that Liz and Petra, the story's two most prominent female characters, are both in greater positions of authority in the parallel universe.
Now you listen to me, Petra.
Must I remind you once again that I am Assistant Director of this project? You will address me in the correct manner.
It may be a fascist dictatorship, but at least they have feminism. Greg Sutton, played by Derek Newmark, is perhaps the most consistent character across both universes. Don't forget to give this video a like, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Inferno was actually the final story to feature Liz Shaw. By the end of Season 7, it had been decided that Liz didn't fulfill the narrative requirements of the companion role. In other words, she was overqualified. Her sudden absence was explained away in the opening story of Season 8, Terror of the Autons.
I've been agitating for a new assistant ever since Miss Shaw went back to Cambridge.
Liz was a highly qualified scientist. I want someone with the same qualifications.
Nonsense. What you need, doctors, Miss Shaw herself so often remarked, is someone to pass you your test tubes and to tell you how brilliant you are.
As much as I like Liz, it's hard to deny that the character was underserved by her time on the series.
I'll send for a doctor.
I happen to be a Doctor, Brigadier, remember?
By happy coincidence, the final shot of episode 7 is a close-up of Liz. What the production team didn't know at the time was that Carolyn John was actually 3 months pregnant and wouldn't have been available to return for another season even if she had been invited back. John did return to Doctor Who 13 years later for a brief cameo in the 20th anniversary special The Five Doctors. She also appeared in the infamous Dimensions in Time, but we won't hold that against her. From 2007 through to her death in 2012, John reprised the role of Liz Shaw on audio as part of the Companion Chronicles range from Big Finish. Since 2019, John's daughter, Daisy Ashford, has voiced Liz in the Third Doctor Adventures range. Somewhat poetically, her debut story, Primord, was a direct sequel to Inferno. I was surprised to learn that many fans consider the Primords an unnecessary inclusion, as to me, they've always been one of the most memorable aspects of Inferno. The idea of being forcibly transformed into something inhuman is horrifying. Benton's accelerated transformation is especially disturbing. The creatures are never actually referred to as Primords on screen, however the name is used in the closing credits for episodes 5 and 6. The story never offers a definitive explanation for these creatures. The name Primord is clearly derived from the word primordial, suggesting that, like the Silurians, their origin may be entirely terrestrial, as though the Earth itself was fighting back against humanity's interference.
Listen to that! It's the sound of this planet screaming out its rage!
Doctor Who has tackled environmental themes multiple times, to varying degrees of success. It's interesting to see the Doctor face a force so unfathomable that the only way to win is to leave it alone. Certain pieces of expanded media have tried to link the green substance in Inferno to the great vampires. Personally, I prefer a more ambiguous interpretation. Director Douglas Camfield had been involved with Doctor Who in various roles since the very beginning. Despite being credited for all 7 episodes of Inferno, Camfield only directed the first 2 in their entirety, as he suffered a minor heart attack partway through production. Due to the relentless nature of TV production schedules, the remaining 5 episodes were actually directed by producer Barry Letts, who was also an experienced director. However, at the time, BBC regulations meant that the same person couldn't be credited as both producer and director. In the end, Camfield directed all the exterior location scenes, as well as the studio scenes for episodes 1 and 2, while Letts directed the studio scenes for episodes 3 to 7. To Letts' credit, the transition is pretty seamless. For those unfamiliar with BBC production practices in the 1970s, everything filmed on location was shot on film, while everything filmed in the studio was shot on video. The visual contrast can be quite jarring. For Inferno, a handful of special effects shots were filmed on location at Ealing Studios, which meant they were shot on film. In context, the quality of these shots really stands out. This particular shot looks straight out of a classic horror film. To be honest, it's a real shame the whole story wasn't shot on film. At least we have Spearhead from space. John Pertwee was keen to establish his Doctor as a man of action. Inferno features the first use of Venusian Aikido, referred to here as Venusian Karate.
I have it! Doctor! What on earth do you think you're doing?
Venusian karate. It's very effective. Hold it long enough, and the subject remains permanently paralyzed.
I suggest you let him go.
This is quite an action-heavy story, with a lot of stunt work by the team from Havoc. By far the most memorable stunt is this impressive fall in episode 3. Funnily enough, Roy Scammell, who performed the fall, also played the soldier who fires the fatal shot. Pertwee was uncharacteristically nervous filming the scenes on top of the chemical tanks, though to the actor's credit, those nerves aren't apparent on screen. The events of Inferno established that not only can the TARDIS console be removed from the rest of the ship, as it had been in the previous story, the Ambassadors of Death, it can also function independently when supplied with a sufficient power source, such as a nuclear reactor. Funnily enough, the doors to the Doctor's hut do bear a passing resemblance to police box doors, particularly the windows. This was actually the final on-screen appearance of the original TARDIS console built for an unearthly child in 1963.
So that's a contraption, is it?
The console, Mr. Sutton, the console.
Well, I thought it'd be a bit more impressive than that.
After 7 years, the prop had become somewhat dilapidated. Despite the prevalence of parallel universes in sci-fi, it would be another 36 years before Doctor Who revisited the concept on screen. One particular story from the making of Inferno became synonymous with Nicholas Courtney, recounted here by script editor Terence Dix.
Nick came into the rehearsal room one day, or perhaps in the studio, I think in the studio, and everybody was sitting there with a black eye patch on. And they expected him to crack up, but Nick, being a great old pro that he is, simply went on playing and everybody else cracked up.
According to writer and former showrunner Stephen Moffat, the scenes in which everybody was wearing an eye patch in The Wedding of River Song were included as a tribute to Courtney, who passed away in 2011. Inferno was voted the best story of the Third Doctor's era by the readers of Doctor Who magazine in 1998, 2009, 2014 and 2023. Both Carolyn John and Nicholas Courtney also named it as their favourite story. My own feelings towards this story are pretty obvious. If you're looking for an example of why Doctor Who has lasted 6 decades, I humbly submit Inferno as one diamond story. Thanks again to Shebogan Who and Small Ed for organising this collaboration. Make sure you check out the other videos in the playlist. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what your favourite Doctor Who story is. Or better yet, make your own video celebrating one diamond story. If you enjoyed this video, why not give it a like? Maybe share it with a friend. Or an enemy. Either way, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to see more content here on Channel 73.